Yeah,
as I say.
yeah, that's still playing. So welcome all. Thanks for joining the party. We think we got that right, which is always very exciting. So some quick introductions as we chat about the business of you. Okay, can you still hear me, Nick?
I can hear you.
Perfect.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I was hearing double for a second. All right, well, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining the party. Some quick introductions. I am Marnie Stockman, and my business partner Nick Coniglio is here, and we're excited to chat today a little bit about us. So, for those of you that we haven't met, I started out as a high school math teacher. So I was a firm believer that it was my responsibility to help every student become the best version of themselves. Nick started out at a very different end of the world as a programmer, quickly found himself in leadership roles, and along the way found himself as single digit employee of 4 different startups, where he found that the role that fascinated him was his need to grow as he hired fresh out of high school, early college hires, and help them grow to become their best version. So mutually, we have sort of the same goal, and we worked together in a company, and then we have started a company together, and that was really our passion to work on helping folks become the best versions of themselves. So we decided after we sold our company that we would write a book. So we've written a couple of books, and we'll talk about them a bit. But the second book we wrote was called The Business of You. And as we started researching for that book, we were really looking to see what made folks successful. So we've had so many conversations, thousands of conversations with the kids and young adults that we've talked to and hired, and also folks who were getting it right in the business world. And what we found is, whether they realized it or not, they were running their life like a business. And so we had this notion of writing The Business of You, where we helped kids figure out how to be the CEO of their own lives. What was interesting about that is, a lot of people think, oh, yeah, I get it. I have to be the boss of me. I have to be the CEO of my own life. But kids often think that that means just delegating like everybody else is going to take care of the rest of themselves. But in fact, that makes them the chief marketing officer, the chief of human resources, the chief financial officer. And it's the chief financial officer bit that we want to talk about today. So, we recognized as we were researching for the book that there's more than one type of investment. So most people think of investing in terms of money, but it's also how you invest your time. Hence the title that of raising kids who invest wisely in themselves. So we're super excited. We brought along a rock star to help us with the money portion, and Nick's going to give her an intro.
Yeah, thanks, Marnie. And we are so excited today to introduce our guest, Chelsea Kiehler. Uh, Quick story, we first met Chelsea when she organized a book study around our first book, Lead It Like Lasso. And as we often say, we knew right away that Chelsea was our type of people. Um, when we kind of gotten to know Chelsea, it feels like she's done just about everything in the world of finance from my perspective, from running her own business to managing billions in assets at Merrill Lynch. But really, what's really stuck out to us was her drive and her passion to help people with financial literacy, and especially young people. That's the passion Marnie and I work on a daily basis. Um, so we also know that she's a mom, she's a volunteer, she is that lifelong advocate for financial literacy, and she somehow still finds time, I think, to bake some things, travel with her family, and we're absolutely thrilled to have her here today to talk about what it really means to invest in yourself. So, Chelsea, welcome. Correct us if we got any of that wrong, and tell us all the things you do in the financial world, and specifically, if you can, how it relates to lifelong learning about financial literacy, please.
Sure. Thank you so much first for even inviting me. I'm honored and thrilled. Loved your initial book. The part that Nick left out was that I actually basically cyber stalked them into letting them know about our corporate book club. And so it was great. It was fun. And wow, we were not going to have enough time to go into all the history, but I'll give you the short story version fast. And to put it in the most simple way that I can, it's I have a calling to help people. And early in my years in finance, I thought that meant being the financial advisor, and then it shifted into being the portfolio manager, and then it shifted into being the business consultant and working with others. And so I've worn a lot of different hats and had a lot of exposure to all of the different areas. And I've had the chance to meet so many pioneers in the space. So a lot of the formation of my ideas are not original. They're borrowed and repurposed from all of the other great people who've gone before me. And I would say it was my exposure in the ultra high net worth private banking side where we were doing work with the very, very, very wealthy families, and this notion of my original beliefs that money just kind of perpetuated, right? Were shattered. And I started realizing the staggering facts of 60% of wealth is gone by the second generation, 90% of wealth is gone by the third generation. And all of these wealthy families were spending time and energy into preparing their family to be stewards of the wealth and family mission statements and how they can pass their values on. So it opened up this whole world to me of, wow, even really rich people have financial literacy problems. And I was shocked. And then I would have clients that would come in and they would be normal, everyday, factory workers, teachers, lawn care maintenance people. And they would reach financial freedom and they would be debt free and they would have their retirement and they would be fine and mapped out. And then I would have CFOs of companies, publicly traded companies. This is a real story, who sat across the table from me with no real assets to his name, making $1 million salary and not having a plan and having tons of stress. And this idea of financial literacy is not just about the dollars in your bank, it's about so much more. And so it really got me kind of thinking, where do I want to do with my financial background, right? And so it led me down the path to develop Retirement Planning Center, which is all about financial literacy and wellness. And we bring it into the space as an employer group benefit. We bring it into the homes. We have kids in finance training. And then I also run an advisory practice where I pour into advisors and help them develop and become holistic advisors and how they can pour into the next gen and prepare people so that their assets can last. So there's so much more to it, but to try to sum it up small, I'd say that's enough.
Well, just in some of those stories, like you get it. There's a big need for that, for that story to be true. Yeah. Wow. So part of Nick, did she answer the second part of you want to ask the second part of your question, or is that a good start?
I think that's a great start.
Okay.
Let's get right into it. Absolutely.
So the question here we were thinking about is, what if your teen felt as confident with their money as they felt with their phone, right? I think we can all agree that they are not. And I think that, kind of 0.0 people would argue with the fact that students need to know more in this area. We pulled up a couple of facts about it ourselves. Not as scary as yours. That was an interesting story for sure. But 54% of teens feel unprepared for their financial future. Less than 20% of them actually talk about money at home.
Yeah, and I think the third one's not necessarily a fact, but it's reality, and we talk about this all the time. Building habits, how it compounds over time, kind of like finance and money compounds over time. But I really want to talk about, and you've mentioned that, why it's so important. But I'm interested, Chelsea, in why, like a lot of the things that I do are based on experiences when I was a child and what motivates me and what drives me. Can you share a little bit about, your upbringing and what that means and how that drove you to where you're at today?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a little bit of two sides to this, right? So there's my personal story and version. And so when you're listening to that, think about how you could basically learn from my own mistakes or how it might pertain. I was lucky enough to have a mom who was very transparent, and she was very much like, here's how it is, but you can do it differently. And so I, from a very young age, had the mindset of, okay, so this is my reality, but I can do something differently. My mom was in sales, so it was that typical feast or famine, right? Where
Yep.
we would have money, we would not have money. And so that was the picture. We didn't have a lot of college educated people in our family, right? So it was like the first generation of college and getting into a career to make significant income. So, I would say we were not below poverty line, but relatively close. So I could see into different worlds and I could see struggles from a single mom perspective. So that has a lot to do with my background and where I was personally. And I was very intentional about not wanting to have the financial stress and burdens and struggles and wanting to reach financial freedom. That was a very clear goal from a very young age. And because of the situation I was in, but I'm grateful for the transparency that my mom allowed me to have. So, you talk your number 2 point, less than 20% talk at home. When you stop talking is when bad things happen and when you pretend, right? And so I'm not saying that you need to burden your children with stress, but you also don't want to put rose colored glasses on their ish, right?
Yep.
And so your question about if kids could be confident with money like their phone, well, I think a little bit is sometimes they're overconfident because they don't really know where the money comes from or how
Yeah.
hard it is to get. And so it's easy to spend someone else's money. And so they're not prepared because a lot of times they have a lack of understanding of where it's going to come from, how hard it is to even get money, and then all of the things you have to spend it on. So that number 2 point to me is the most important. You have to be talking. And we talk about, you can start talking about money in light, easy ways with your toddlers, right? The bartering and the games of playing, and there's so many different ways that you can incorporate it into daily life. But as your kids grow and as they're in high school and college, letting them know all of the different uses of money, including earning it and having it, and there really is no right or wrong. I don't want to pretend like this is you can subscribe to one way, right? Because every family is a little different. People are going to have different values, and so
Yeah.
you have to identify what your values are and know that that's going to rub off on others in a positive or negative way, right? Because I've
Yeah.
worked with a lot of people who had extremely frugal parents and they were just so annoyed by that they went opposite and become extravagant spenders or vice versa, right? And so having the understanding is the first step, right? And so that starts with the talking. And then once you have that baseline understanding, then you can start being aware and then you can start making good decisions. So
I
yeah, I
think
love
I
that.
think there's personally speaking, there's a lot to unpack there. As a matter of fact, it wasn't just this weekend that um, it was Parents Weekend at the University of Georgia, and my 21-year-old son made the statement that just floored my wife, which was, "I'm never going to have to worry about money." And we're like, "Whoa, what did we do wrong?" It was like that came from nowhere. And it's reality. It reflected as I was thinking through preparing for this conversation. We had so much of a focus growing up about the credentials list, right? Getting good grades, getting certifications, that I think we probably thought we were doing a good job communicating things around financial literacy and how important it is to build those skills, but we didn't do the follow up, the checks. And I'm not saying that he's a lost cause by any stretch of the imagination. And I think part of it is due to the fact that there are some frugal people in my family, right? And he's kind of revolting around that a little bit. But just that transparency and open perspective and having the conversations is really a good point. And I think I'm going to stop sharing so we can all see our faces
Perfect.
at
And
this
have a
point.
chat.
Yeah. Did that work? There
Yeah.
we go.
Yeah. That's good.
Okay.
So So what are some of the other ways that kids, how are they learning about money?
Yeah, sure. So, the easiest way young kids learn about money is through play. But when you want to get really serious is high school, because that's when it starts having some meaning to it. So obviously, giving them some ability to use money is a huge way. But take them shopping,
Mm.
right? So school clothes, right, and different things that have to go on, and whether you can afford it or not doesn't matter. But letting them see what it is to shop and to bargain and to look for deals and to look for sales, or hey, you have $100, what are you going to buy in this store? Buy one get one free, or a different season, or this or that. And so letting them have some voice in it is important. Communication and talking is huge. That has to be there. But kids learn from silent observation and listening too.
Mm.
Do not think anything is happening under your roof without the kids understanding it. So if you have financial burden, there's a level of stress and they're going to pick up on it. And so it's better to have some level of conversation. And again, I'm not suggesting that you burden your kids with true
Yeah.
stresses that are beyond their emotional limits to take, but having some baseline conversations. You know what, we really can't afford to do that right now, but we could set a goal as a family, and if we really want to do this, then what can we all sacrifice to get there?
Yeah.
Let's skip going out to dinner once a week. Can we rotate and helping cook dinner? Can we and let them be involved in that, because there are sacrifices that have to be made, right? Money is not endless and open.
Yep.
And the other bad money trap that people fall into is, if I only had, if I only had
Mm.
5,000 more dollars, everything would be fine. Well, let me promise you, as soon as you get there, you're going to say it again. The money just goes. So
Yeah.
whatever money you have coming in, it's gone, right? You're going to get your raise and it's gone. So build in that idea of, hey, if we want something outside, it's going to take some kind of level of sacrifice, and get your kids involved in that and let them feel it a little bit, right? Hey, you really wanted to do this big ski trip and bring your friends with us. Well, you're not going to be able to go to the movies as much. Maybe we have a home movie night instead. And that's going to cost $10 for popcorn instead of $100 for dinner, movie, and popcorn, right? And
Yeah.
let them participate. So for those that teen year, I think that's huge. And then also be real intentional about how you're giving them money, right? Like there's some conflicting ideas around allowances or access to credit cards or debit cards and all of these things. And so again, I'm not going to tell you what to do, right? We're all parents doing the best we can, right? There's no perfect manual. But I would say be intentional about how you're going about it and think about unintended consequences of it, right? Because there really is no such thing as free money in the real world. So my son loves video gaming, and I will not let a dollar of my money go towards video gaming. So he washes mailboxes in the neighborhood, and that's his video game money. And that's fine. He can do what he wants with his money, but I won't put a dollar of my money towards it. And he knows that.
Yeah.
And so I think that those are powerful ways to teach, right? You have to teach you there's a way to make money, there's a way to use money,
Yeah.
and talk about it.
I for sure my daughter didn't seem to have any grasp of how money worked until she had to spend her own. If you see any of the Instagram videos of like 20 something year old daughters crying because like I just found out how expensive I was. Yeah, you sure did. It is interesting when they have to then prioritize. Although I have to say that so she went and got a business degree with a marketing focus. She now has actually helped friends budget. And she will tell you, if you called her right now, she would tell you, I can spend $43 a day. And she bought a house after my mortgage, after this. And she just last weekend, this is a very hot topic in the house. Her best friend, she sat her down and said, do you know how much you can spend a day? And her friend had no idea how to do it. So it's interesting when you don't have those conversations, you assume that everybody has some sense of what they can or can't do. And she had zero idea until they sat down and budgeted it out. So I think I just all a big check mark agree on all of those things.
And what I found, yeah, absolutely across the board check marks. But we often talk about just in the world of standing out, whether it's for an internship, a job, getting into college, the whole notion of telling stories and the fact that it's 22 times more effective telling stories than just reciting facts. And I love that you called out, Chelsea, this whole notion of being transparent. And I'm sure with your kids, you've talked about what it was like growing up, just like you just told us right now. And the fact is that kids do listen to that and they remember that. They don't remember saying, save $5. They remember a story tied behind why you should save $5. And that's the exact same thing that Marty and I kind of talk about all the time in terms of making an impact on people around you, building your network. They don't remember what you tell them in terms of fact recital. They remember the story about how you got there. So I think we're in line and have a lot of synergy around that for sure.
You mentioned something else at the beginning, Chelsea, that I think it's something Nick and I talk about all the time, is that you have to understand what you value in terms of your core values and how that can affect your spending. So can you talk a little bit more about what you have seen? Because even my kids have different values and I know how that affects their spending, which is interesting. Clearly your son, video games, he can meet my son. They can go play some gaming
Yeah.
together.
Yeah. So obviously core values are deeply held beliefs, right? And they govern how we act and function. But there's also money values, right? And so a lot of a lot of times people don't even understand that they have these. So there's in my world, there's 5 principal money values, and there's a lot of different research and books. Some have a few more, some have a few less. But for today, general, let's talk about the 5 that we recognize. The first is safety and security. And so these are the people who their natural disposition is, I need to provide safety and security. So they're going to naturally be the budgeters, right? And they're going to like naturally be and like savers and whatnot, right? There's also money value that values status and image. These are going to be the folks who are going to have the name brands, right? So it's not a bad thing,
Keeping
right?
up with
But
the Joneses.
yeah, so when we're going through these values, don't label them as good or bad, but keep in mind the principle of any strength overdone can become a weakness. So if status is important
Hmm.
to you, right? If you overdo it, if you start buying things you can't afford and you start going into credit card debt because of it, that needs to be a warning and a red flag sign for you, right? But if you can afford it, then there's nothing wrong
Yep.
with having pride in an image and in the different scenarios that you're in. The next one is fun, enjoyment. So there's a lot of talk right now about gifting experiences instead of things because we've become so materialistic, right? So like everyone's talking about the experiences. Well, that's going to really resonate with people who have the value of fun. And so they view money as a tool to have experiences and to have fun. But not everybody has that intrinsically. Some people don't really care about those kinds of things. So if you're not jumping on that bandwagon, don't feel like you have anything wrong with you. It's just how do you align with your natural values and your money? Planning. So this one is most associated with safety and security, but it focuses also on any kind of planning. So it could be a vacation plan, it could be retirement plan, it could be college plan, whatever your short, intermediate, long-term goals. It's like I'm very focused in planning. Right, your daughter has her daily plan, right? Her budget down to the 43.
Yeah.
So I would say her
Oh,
natural
gee,
goals.
I'm sitting here thinking apple tree is what I was thinking as you said it. So I'm seeing. Thank you. Moving
Yeah.
on.
Yeah. And then the last value is giving and providing to others, right? So there are some people who their natural core is to help and to give. So all 5 of these are useful and powerful and can be used in a positive way. All 5 of them can be overdone and turn into a weakness. And so that's why it's so important to know as
Did we
parents
lose
where you
Chelsea's
lie
audio
on those
or is it
values
just me?
because you could
I think
be,
we lost her audio.
oh,
Yeah.
Okay. Hopefully she'll come back. Well, it's interesting in the talking about, oh,
my back?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well,
I think we're going to give your video a second to catch up here, Chelsea, because there's a little bit of lag. But I think what I find really interesting about this, and really eye-opening, is we do something similar with leadership archetypes and profiles and what type of leader are you, and we talk so much about the self-reflection. I've never kind of heard of the financial needs and wants and money values set up that same way. And I guess I'm curious if if it's just as simple as talking through the 5 buckets that you mentioned, or are there similar assessment profiles in the financial literacy world that really identify each of these categories? And then more importantly, you talked about, okay, if this is causing a problem, if I'm going into debt because I'm so focused on status and creating an image, what the mitigation plans and how you might get out of doing such things. Is there such a thing out there around that?
there are a couple of different types of tools, and there's some game-like systems that are cards where it doesn't tell you which value, but you just put them in piles of this is important or not, and then you can look to say, oh, I had a lot of spontaneous fun, or I had a lot of planning security. So there are different tools that are available. Um, and a lot of them are available online, right? So if you just Google money values, you'll probably find a couple of different systems. So I've used a handful of different ones.
Go ahead, Nick. You look like you were going to say something.
No, I was going to say you're echoing, Marnie.
Oh.
I'm sorry. I was off topic, but yeah, you can go. Are we all caught up?
Yeah, I think so. So I find the game, that would be a very interesting way to play with kids or students to figure out what their strengths are. And to your point, when that strength becomes a weakness, what can you do to fix it? How will you know before it goes completely sideways? How will you know? That's interesting.
Yeah, and I think it's really hard to do it for yourself, but it's really easy for you to do it to others. Like, I can look at my parents and I can know exactly where they fall and how maybe they overdid one versus another. And so when you start thinking about it, you can start reflecting a little bit more. But more often than not, where you get the big misalignments in values between parents and kids, it's often because parents will overemphasize one and their kids are another, right? So if your kids are all about fun and status and you're all about safety and planning, it's going to be butting heads, right? Or vice versa. So just being very intentional, knowing that there's a purpose and a place for all of them, knowing that you need to be able to lean in and access all of the values, but know who you really are, I think is really important. Warning signs, obviously, like you just said, credit card debt. If you're going into a lot of credit card debt, then that's going to be a big warning sign. If you are neglecting, if you're hoarding a lot of money and you have much more than you need, and then you're sacrificing on other things and being maybe stingy, like there might be some warning flags of, hey, you're overdoing safety and planning, right? Like, I have had clients who have refused vacations because they were afraid they wouldn't be able to make retirement. And I'm like, but we've done the plan. You can take a vacation. Your plan still works. Yep. But they were so worried and so into safety and security that they were actually self detrimental to their spending, right? They weren't spending enough. It was like, you're never going to run out of money. And you're sacrificing your lifestyle because you're letting that safety and security overwhelm the rest of your life, right? So listen to your financial advisors. I don't think you're going to have that problem with teens. Most of the time, the teens are overspending. Most of the time, they're like, status and fun tend to be their core values until they understand. And usually, you have to have some skin in the game. Until you have a job until you're earning money and paying taxes on money, these are hard lessons to learn. Because when you're given an allowance or given access to a parent's credit card, like I said, it's easy to spend someone else's money. But when you get your first paycheck and you pay your first tax bill and you pay all the rest of your bills, that's where it starts coming in. And you had mentioned needs and wants. That's got to be a conversation, because a lot of times kids just don't have a clear boundary between needs and wants, and that line is blurred. And there's a lot of things that are really wants that they list on their needs side. We do some next gen activities around budgeting and financial independence, and you'd be surprised how many financial kids think that they are financially independent. I have a job and I'm doing this and this. I'm like, okay, well, who's paying your insurance? And are you still on your parents' cell phone? And and so they're like, oh, I guess I'm not quite as independent as I thought, right? And so there's this whole transition to financial independence that happens, and it's different age for different kids. Some it's young, some it happens 17, 18 right away. Some it happens fully at 26 when they finally get off the medical insurance coverage. And they're like, what? This is how expensive medical insurance is. So I think it is a disservice for parents not to have some level of conversation, because you don't want your kids blindsided. Financial stress is linked to every pillar of well-being. And the one that is most worrisome to me is mental health. When you have financial stress, you are 3 times more likely to have mental health issues, anxiety, depression, suicide. Money is so linked to it, and it's so important. And why would we as parents not want to arm our kids with the right tools, right? And we got a little bit, I really kind of hijacked this conversation into all money. I love the Business of Use chapter about allocating money and finance and time, because the allocation of time is so important. And that is really the foundation, because where you spend your time is like where your focus is. And that does directly tie to money, like later in life. And so I don't want to miss the chance of highlighting that, because that's my favorite part of your book. And it was eye-opening to me, because I was like, wow, this is such, you're focusing on the young adults, but it's such a powerful lesson, even as we advance in our careers and in lives, is like being very intentional in where we're spending our time and energy, because those are our deposits there too. And I love how those tie together, right? So spend the time to talk to your kids about money.
Yeah. Well, I think
So
that's a great segue.
yeah,
Right
it is
there.
very much. I had the opportunity to give a graduation address at our local high school, and I gave a little bit about them being the CEO of their own lives and being their chief financial officer. And when I asked the question, would you invest in you? Would you invest in your habits? You could see the eyes looking at me. Like, all right, I don't necessarily like the way that question was asked. I'm going to think on that. And we even have a slide to share in kind of
Yeah.
conversation.
But before we get to that slide, I do, because you just brought up investing. And I'm curious, Chelsea, do you have recommendations? You can show kids the charts that show the benefits of compounding interest and the benefits of investing early. How do you recommend that you really teach those concepts to those high school students, so they really go in once they do leave the house and they start to make even very basic steps into that financial independence, that they do start early, even if it's not 100% aligned with their value, because research shows how much that pays off in the long run, right? How do you
Yep.
do that?
Yeah. There's no perfect answer. Every parent's going to have their own path. Personally, I let my kids see the fruits of their labor. So we will have short, intermediate, and long-term goals. My son's long-term goal is a car. And I told him, for all of the dollars that he saves and invests in his little account, we will match when it's time to buy a car. Now, hopefully I don't regret that. He made me like sign a little contract. I hope that he's not like stocking up more than I can afford. But you got to start somewhere, right? And so with the small awards and the small purchases, it's not going to be true investments. It's going to be a savings account, right? Minimal interest. But for your longer term, for cars, for college, for house, for home, like living, right? So I had one client who let their child stay at home for college, but charged rent, and it went into a high interest savings. And at the end of college, that entire deposit was their down payment for a house. And so they got to see the reoccurring save. So it was building the habit of being consistent with a payment. They got to see the growth, right? So interest rates, which at least they're a little higher now than they were a while ago. 529s, education plans may be or may not be right for some folks. So really kind of talking with your financial advisor on what might be right. I want to not give any broad advice so that I don't get into trouble. But I see no harm in letting the kids actually see their account. Right. Now there could be some exceptions, right? If your child doesn't have the emotional ability, you need to know that at age of majority, if you have an UTMA account for them, they have legal rights to it. Right. So if they're not mature enough for it, and you don't want them to have access, you need to talk through a professional to make sure that it's set up right. But letting them see, hey, did you know that you can actually own a piece of stock in a company you like Disney? We can own that and we can watch it go up and down. Nike and Under Armour and whatever, the things that they're using, and that they're, you have a daughter who probably loves Lululemon. They could possibly buy one of their shares, right? But again, I'm not recommending an individual stock, to each their own, but I have seen some advisors get younger kids excited about investing by having kind of a brand where they own a couple of stocks or a couple of things that they can talk about. But seeing that statement, seeing the deposit, seeing it, there's a lot of great literature out there teaching about the value of compounding interest. So we have one of our charts, and so people, maybe 10% of people will get it and will actually listen. The other 90% won't. And then they'll say, I wish I would have. Unfortunately, that's just the way that it goes. But you could have a child you could have a young adult graduate from college, get a job, and start saving at 25 and save for just 10 years, and then quit saving. And you could have someone that started at 35 and saved till retirement, and that 25-year-old's going to have more retirement money because of the power of compounding, right? So we have charts to visualize it, and some kids will see it and they'll be like, yeah, those kids that get excited are probably naturally planners and goal-oriented values, right? And so that's the ones that get it. Yep. The other ones, our best hope is to teach them bucketing. You need to do this, this, and this. Budgeting, right? So your daughter who sat her friend down to say, budget your money, know what you can spend, and just being disciplined. But that also comes back to the conversations, your daily habits, teaching that discipline. And that ties into charity and giving too. One of the biggest mistakes that I see is that parents will do this and not incorporate their kids, and then wonder why their value didn't transfer. So let them be involved, right? So there's different programs. You could have a little family meeting. Let's decide which charity we're going to support and how we're going to do it, or allocate a budget to them. Hey, you get to give $500 away to any charity you want. Who are you giving your money to, right? I think I got off tangent. I'm sorry. I do that often.
No, I loved it. I thank you for answering that question. I think we'll kind of segue back to where we were going to go with that, and especially around charitable giving. It doesn't have to be just money. It can be your time. And kind of circling back, Marnie, I think we have a couple of things to share about that, right? You want to start going? Want to figure out how to share this?
Yeah. So it's interesting because when we started talking about, okay, what if in the book we talked about time as an investment instead of money? We bucketed time in the same way. When we saw your slides come over, we thought, oh, that's interesting. We had some of the same buckets. So we included them in 4 areas. So we said, you spend time, you save time, you grow time, use time to grow, or you can waste time. And when students start looking at this, like, okay, how is my spend? In the same way that I have to spend money on the needs, those are those necessary responsibilities. Like, what are you doing? School, chores, work, etc. Saving money is when you're doing things to help you rest. You mentioned mental health. recovery, right? Like your body needs time to do that. And so sleep, hobbies, families, right? Things that can keep you well. What are activities that you do to grow? So in the same way that you would invest money, how do you grow with time? How do you compound your efforts? So these are activities that make you better: reading, practice, exercise, learning, whatever hobbies that you're doing that improve you, versus where are you wasting time? Where are you truly just throwing out? So this is, your ninth Happy Meal of the week. I would consider wasted money. Some may not, but I would. So same thing with time. Where are you wasting time? Where there's no positive return? And that's doom scrolling, gossiping, distractions, etc. So we like to help students think about how they're bucketing their time into these categories, because in the same way that you think about money, you can think about time.
Yeah. Yeah. And Chelsea, I'm going to tee one up for you to think about. So in each of these conversations, we like to have, okay, what's one quick takeaway that you can leave anybody who's listening, our audience, with? And you've given us so many already, so you don't have to, you're off the hook unless you have something specific. But along the lines of this time audit that we're showing up here and that Marnie was discussing, one of the things that we're going to give everybody the opportunity who listens either live or asynchronously is a downloadable conversation starter. So it comes 360 into what you were talking about earlier, Chelsea. We like to call it kitchen table discussions, where we have, we've given some common questions as it relates to both investing your time and investing your money, and talking through with your children how that might allocate into the buckets that we have. So that's the one takeaway that I think fully and wholly supports your message, Chelsea, in terms of having these conversations and thinking about what drives your motivations and where the actual time and money is going. So we're going to leave people with that, and we're going to give people a quick link on that later. But I did
did
want to
just
give
drop it in on LinkedIn, and I'll put it on Facebook when I get to the feed there, but we'll show it on the screen as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So was there anything, Chelsea, that you additional, because you've given us so much at all, is there any other takeaways that you want to leave our listening audience with real quick?
Well, I'll borrow from others because what I tend to do. But there's a lot of like fun TikTok videos or challenges out there, right? Like everyone's probably heard of the $20 challenge, and you can make it your own, right? So you can create your own challenge. So depending on your income level and your budget and all of that, see how you can start saving and give yourself a challenge. How many days in a row, weeks in a row, months in a row, right? Figure it out. Can you consistently just save $20? Right? And set a mini goal. Money is just like running a marathon. You can't just get up and do it, right? You have to make a active plan. So start somewhere, and whatever that looks like for each person is going to be so different. But you got to have a goal. And so having an emergency savings goal should be everyone's first step in building a solid foundation. Because without that emergency fund, when you get the flat tire or you chip your tooth or your glasses break or whatever might happen, because life happens to everybody, you need to have a little bit of pocket emergency fund. So that is step one. And so whatever that looks like, if you've already got $1,000, then set your goal at 5. If you've already got 5, then do a month or 3 months, whatever it is. Stretch yourself, right? Set your own goal, and then pick up the $20 challenge, and create it. Make it your own, and challenge yourself. That's a great first step. It would be a fun exercise.
Absolutely. Absolutely love that. So for those that are looking for our little kitchen table talk conversation starter, you'll see the link up there. I'll also put this on the page where it's 100% clickable and downloadable. So that is something that I hope a lot of people get value for, and I'll put it for 10 more seconds. We just ask for, it's just a form. You go in there, you fill out the form, and then you will get a download of the guide.
In addition to the guide, we have the slides from today, along with a couple of the ones that Chelsea had sent along about some of her talking points as slides. So if folks were thinking, oh, I'd love to share this with students or their kids, we have those attached as well.
Awesome. So just real quick, Chelsea, for those who might be interested to find out more about who you are, what you do, and just generally connect, can you share with our audience on how they might find you?
Yeah, I'm the only Chelsea Kiehler there is. So if you just type in Kiehler in your Google, I should pop right up for you. Connect with me on LinkedIn. Happy to, we've got, different resources from our financial literacy topics. And I can definitely, it's my passion, right? I want to help as many people reach financial freedom, and it looks different for everybody, but that's my passion. And if there's anything that I can do to help others, I'm happy to do so. So feel free to connect and reach out.
That's awesome. And for those of you that do not know, either Marnie or myself, this is the first time you're hearing us. We're also easy to find on LinkedIn. I am the only Nick Coniglio, to my knowledge. There might be a couple of Marnie Stockmans that are out there.
Zero other Marnies.
Zero other Marnies. Okay. So we're all unique birds. How about that? I like it. And if anybody is looking to find out more about our book, The Business of You, you can find it at thebusinessofyou.ai. And the link is showing right there. So Marnie, you want to close it out?
Yeah, thanks for joining us. I did just put all of those links in our LinkedIn page as well. So Chelsea, we are super excited that you came to chat with us today. We think this is really an important conversation as students are figuring out how to be the CFO of their own lives, their own little chief financial officers. They need to figure out how they can invest time and money properly to make that compound. Again, to your point, it's the freedom that you get, not just freedom to do what you want, but you mentioned the freedom of the stress that money can cause. I think that's really a huge takeaway. And I think it's just thank you very much for having this conversation. We talk with a lot of folks. I'm actually working with a couple school systems who are implementing our time activities into their personal finance class because they recognize that these two conversations go closely together. And we're super excited that they've got personal finance for every kid as it is. So thank you very much for having us. For joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Yes.
Awesome. Thanks, Chelsea.
Yep. Everybody have a good one.
Thanks.
Yep.